Welcome back, Honors. God, man, I hope you guys were enjoying your break. Decided to reduce this to just like one decently sized flip just to make it so you can actually not have to worry too much over your break about when the second one's coming and things like that. And I also decided to do this after Christmas because I wanted to actually give you time to hang out with your families and enjoy yourself and whatnot. So anyway, but let's go ahead and get straight into it. So where we left off, God, almost a week ago, was the establishment of England during the Middle Ages, right? We talked about how after the fallout of the Roman Empire, there wasn't really any like countries left behind. It's a lot of informal kingdoms, and how the Frankish kingdom was the first biggest one. And then in 842, when Charlemagne split it all up, we had the rise of like some of the Eastern kingdoms, like some other shenanigans, the Holy Roman Empire and France, right? And then we discussed, too, the rise of England and how the Angles and the Saxons and the Britons all moved to this island due to its fertility, and they took over the the Roman city of Londinium and created a large-scale city out of that, and how Alfred the Great is going to be their first real leader when he defends from Viking raids during the early Middle Ages. So, yeah, we talked about all that stuff, and then we got into the real meat and potatoes of stuff, though, when King James, the descendant of Alfred the Great, died without any heirs to the throne. And so what's going to happen is, it's not King James. King James was like in the 1600s. I apologize. But it's one of Alfred's grandchildren who's going to die without any heirs to the throne. And so half of England believed it should go to Harold Godwinson, which was his son-in-law, and then the other half believed it should go to William of Normandy, who was a noble from northern France, who actually had been told that he was promised the throne, and that all of this is going to clash together at the Battle of Hastings, okay? Ooh, extra credit opportunity. Your job, if you can figure it out, is tell me the only real historical record of the Battle of Hastings. What is it called? What does it look like? How big is it? That should help. It's completely visual, if that helps. But the first person to come in and tell me the historical record of the Battle of Hastings and the only real surviving one of it will get like they'll get their lowest math quiz bump to a hundo. Deal? All right, then. So anyway, let's get back into it, right? So following the Battle of Hastings, William the Conqueror, he began to call himself, started centralizing power in England, right? Creating a full-fledged government. One of his initiatives to do so is going to be called the Doomsday Book, right? We talked about this, and the Doomsday is a survey of all of the people living in England at the time, what they owned, and how much they could pay in taxes, okay? So this is going to be used as an efficient tax system to create a tax system known as income tax, right? The more you have, the more you can pay. The less you have, the less you can pay, etc., etc., etc. But the Doomsday Book is very, very, very important. Pronounced Doomsday. So the next thing we're going to talk about, though, is about 200 years in the future. So after William is long dead, right? It's during the middle of the Crusades, which we're going to talk about here in about 2 seconds. We're going to talk about how the Crusades were launched, and then we're going to backtrack a little bit and talk about, oh, wait, why is Catholicism such the important thing? Well, we're going to talk about how it's the central keystone of everybody's lives and stuff like that. But the next thing we're about to talk about is probably one of the most important things that's ever occurred in European history, ever. And when I say this word, if you don't respond with pure excitement and joy, we have problems, because that means you don't know your rights, okay? So, for example, we're going to be talking about the Magna Carta. What is that? You're supposed to be saying, like, yay. From now on, if I say Magna Carta, you better respond with a prominent yay, all right? Like a very hyped up, excited yay. Because the Magna Carta is probably one of the single most important things that ever come out of Europe ever. It basically set up the rights that you know of. It's the pre-version of the Bill of Rights. It's the first version of the English Bill of Rights. It's everything that our government is founded upon. It's the ideas of the Magna Carta, right? Thank you, Crumpton. I heard you. All right, anyway, now, so check it out really quick. King Richard the Lionheart, little ground backup foundational story, right? So this is in 1215. This is during the Third Crusade, all right? So King Richard, well, some of you are like, why are we talking about this before we're talking about the Crusades? Well, because we're talking about England particularly, right? And the advancements that England made as a country, okay? So, and their foundations as a country. So this is another thing that came out of England, okay? So the Magna Carta came out of England, if you want to write that down. So anyway, but King Richard the Lionhearted was away, Okay, he was off fighting the Crusades. Ironically enough, when this happened, he had been kidnapped. It's a whole other thing. So we'll talk about that later on. He was actually held for ransom, but then his cousin told him to keep him. I'm not going to pay it anyway. But his cousin is King John, right? King John, some of y'all have heard before. We've heard of the Robin Hood stories, right? Well, they're very, very closely related. So we'll talk about it more and more as time goes on, but there's a chance that Robin Hood was actually a real Englishman and that he actually was like a vigilante person going against what was called fur collar crime at the time. So, but King John, his cousin, had to take over rule while he was gone. So he was the steward of the throne while Richard was gone fighting the Crusades to regain the Holy Land, right? So, let's keep going though. The Magna Carta. Thank you, Colin Bauer. Gwen, heard the both of y'all over there. Good stuff. Anyway, now, so William's descendants had begun to abuse their power, okay? So, particularly one was King John, okay? He is one of his descendants along the way. So, King John had lost most of England's lands in an expensive war with France. Now, just to give you a heads up, France and England have not liked each other since the establishment of their two kingdoms, okay? So they're always fighting wars with each other. One doozy of a war is going to last for over 100 years. We're going to talk about that later on. It's going to last for 116 years, actually. So King John is going to begin to raise taxes on the nobles just to finance the war, and without any backing or without any other reason other than just to repay war debts, right? So he just starts raising taxes, raising taxes, raising taxes. As we know with the American Revolution, do people like to have their taxes raised on them without just cause? Of course not, right? So this angered the nobles, and the nobles would raise an army, because remember, who has the army, the king or the nobility? Nobility has the army because the nobility has access to the vassals that militarily protect their land, so they have access to the military, not the king. If the king wants to fight a war, he has to ask the nobles to send them his vassals. See? So, nobles were very angered and they raised an army and forced King John to sign the Magna Carta. Good job, Gangrich and Olivia. Heard you over there on the backside. So, John's going to sign the Magna Carta. Yes, very good, Laura McCann. In 1215, okay? Now, this thing is so important because it sets up your basic rights, okay? So, for example, it makes it so legally no one can actually take property from you without just cause, that they can't search or seize your area, right? It legally sets up 1,000, your right to a trial by jury is actually set up by this document, right? Well, just so you know, in Latin it means the Great Charter, and it is seriously the most important document to come out of European history probably ever. Some people would say the Treaty of Versailles, Some people would say the Treaty of Paris, Some people would say, like, the Peace of Augsburg, Like, the Magna Carta is the most foundational one that set up everything in the way that Europe would function for hundreds of years following. So, lay the groundwork for democracy. It was in 1215, don't forget that. So, lay the groundwork for democracy in Europe and establish the British Parliament. This right here, the establishment of the British Parliament, crazy important. Circle it like a bunch of times. Star it, make it look like it's exploding, I don't care. The British Parliament, what that is, that's their bicameral legislative branch, okay? So it set up the first legislative branch since the fall of Rome, okay? This is very, very important. This document, so important. So, going forward, though, the basic principles of the Magna Carta, enjoy Margarana, is going to be the king is not allowed to raise taxes without the approval of the Council of Nobles and Clergy, i.e. the British Parliament, right? So, later became known as the British Parliament. The king was also not allowed to arrest people without cause or just take property without just cause. So it set up the rights of the nobility and of common people as well. The right of habeas corpus is going to be brought in really, really quickly. Next to habeas corpus, in Latin, in quotes, it means having the body, okay? Like having the body is in the body of proof, the burden of proof, that you must prove someone is guilty in front of a jury of their peers, right? And also you had to be convicted by a jury to be sent to jail at all. Several of these are in our basic Bill of Rights in our country today. Where do you think they came from? So, also the last one is that the king had to obey all of the laws and was not above any law of common men, okay? So, according to the Magna Carta, if Donald Trump walked into my house right now and, stabbed me, he's gonna go to jail for murder. Same thing as if, I don't know, Obama during his presidency had done it, right? So because the leaders of a country are subject to the same laws as of its regular people. If you have an immune monarch that can do whatever they please, it does not set up equality, all laid down by the Magna Carta. Good job, Rika. So anyway, speaking of going forward though, that is a great document. But we also have to discuss how the power of popes is going to expand as well, okay? So during this time period, popes, of course, were powerful spiritual leaders. They were the leaders of the Catholic Church, right? They also developed political power during the Middle Ages. Popes began to claim authority over rulers. They began to wage wars against other people. A lot of this goes back to that idea, that concept of papal supremacy. Another thing you should go back and circle in your notes like 18 times, okay? Papal supremacy is massively important. This often led to conflicts between popes and kings. One of the very famous popes actually happens to be Gregory VII, right? Gregory VII tried to expand the political power of the pope, right? He was the one that said the pope cannot be judged by no one, and that the Roman Church has never done wrong and will actually never do wrong until the end of time, and that the pope alone could depose and restore bishops, not kings or leaders, and he alone could call general councils and do canon law. He could depose an emperor if he feels like it. He can absolve subjects. Also, one funny thing he made it actually too, if kings wanted to talk to him directly, they had to kiss his feet before he actually would allow them to speak to him. If it would have been me, I'd be like, bleh. Anyway, but the power of the popes is beginning to expand. And one of the best examples of this expansion of their power happens to do with Middle Ages conflict, right? We're going to talk about the calling of the Crusades real quick, and then we're just going to cut it, and we're going to pick it up on Tuesday, okay? So, anyway, the Crusades are going to be a massive example of this power of popes and religious authority, right? So the Crusades were a series of religious wars in order to regain what was known as the Holy Land, right? Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is currently, at this time period, at the beginning, if you want to write this down, you can, just to give you further understanding. To let you understand, Jerusalem was controlled by the Byzantine at the time. Now, the reason why the Catholic Church was okay with the Byzantine being in charge of the Holy Land is because the Byzantinians are also Christian, albeit they're Eastern Orthodox, but they're still Christians, right? So the Holy Land, though, was being attacked, and constantly threatened by a group of people called the Ottoman Turks, okay? Now, the Ottoman Turks, by this point, were a Muslim empire, right? They were actually a Muslim group. Now, funny enough, had they actually taken over Jerusalem, they probably would have allowed Christians to continue to actually have their faith because they were religiously taxes, right? Very Persian. Some of you should have said, oh, Cyrus the Great. Yeah, you're right. All right, so anyway, now, occurred during the High Middle Ages is when it began to be launched, all right? So the reason why Jerusalem is such an important holy site is because, as you can see right here in these three things, it's home to several holy sites to every single religion, okay? So, for example, Muslim architecture, right? You can see the repeating geometric patterns. Also, Christ did some of his early teachings and was born inside of the Jerusalem area, right? So, anyway, I need to look that up and make sure. How about one of y'all looks that up and make sure, just to be safe? So, anyway, and also right here, this is the Wailing Wall. It's one of the last retainable walls of a Jewish temple, and this is a very, very famous site for Jewish people. They actually make pilgrimages to here and write their prayers on small little pieces of paper and put them in the cracks of the wall. There's an entire practice. There's a whole thing. They wear a certain garb. They wear their religious apparel. Things like that. And they go through an entire practice. It's very, very neat. I have a good video clip of that I might actually show you when we come back. So anyway, but Jerusalem, very, very important, right? So Muslims are going to try and gain control of the Holy Land, right? And they actually do. Turks are going to take control of Persia, or what was left of it anyway, and other areas, which is going to lead the Byzantines to calling for help, right? The Byzantinians are going to call for help and say the Holy Land is being threatened, but in the long run, the Byzantines were really calling because they were afraid the Holy Land was going to get taken. They were calling because they were afraid they were going to get taken over. So the Council of Clermont was the very, very first thing to be held, and it was the council that called the Crusades, led by Pope Urban, all right? So Urban is going to call for, Urban II, actually. Urban is going to call for all Christian warriors to fight against the Turks and for them to make a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, hoping that the Turks would actually attack at some point. So this is going to be where we're going to stop. We're going to pick up right here when we get back into school on Tuesday, all right? We're going to talk more about the Crusades. We're going to wrap that up probably in a flip that night, and then get into some other stuff, talk a little bit about the crisis of the late Middle Ages, stuff like that, have your next test probably not the first week back, but the week after we get back. Sound good enough? All right. I will see y'all then, honors. I hope y'all have a fantastic rest of your break, and enjoy yourself, all right?